I'm going to show you how to make half square triangles 2 at a time, half square triangles 8 at a time, and flying geese 4 at a time. And you can do all of these techniques with no special tools, just a regular ruler and rotary cutter is all you need. Often people ask me, what is the best way to make half square triangles? Or what is the best way to make flying geese? And the best way, I think, to make anything is the way that works for you. Try different methods and see what works for you best, what you enjoy doing best, and what gives you the best results. So I'm going to show you the way I like to make half square triangles and flying geese units. These are the very basic building blocks of quilting, and you use these a lot. You take the finished size of the triangle you want. Say if you want a 2-inch finished half square triangle, and you're going to cut 2 squares an inch bigger than that. So you're going to cut 2 squares at 3 inches. I know a lot of instructions will say to cut it at 2 7/8 inches. I just don't like dealing with 7/8. I'd rather cut the 3 inches and then trim it down later, and I know the size is exactly accurate. In all of these methods, I starch these fabrics. I like them to be as stiff as they can be. For one reason, you're going to be drawing a diagonal line on these squares. And when you do that, this is the bias. So as you're drawing your line, you may be stretching out that. So if you starch it really well, then you won't have too much of that problem. So for half square triangles 2 at a time, we're going to cut squares and turn it over to the light side of the fabric. And what you're going to do is draw a diagonal line from one corner to the other. I like to look at the 45-degree mark on my mat and line up the corners on that, because you've got your inch scale on here, and make sure that point is even with that 45-degree angle line. Then put your ruler down, and you want to go slightly to the side because you want to make sure you can see the point, because that's where your pen is going to go. If you put it right on the point, your marking will be slightly over. So put it slightly off so you have enough room, the thickness of your pen, to mark that line. And you want that mark to go right through the points on these corners. Then what you're going to do is take this to the sewing machine and stitch 1/4 inch on either side of these lines. Here is the stitching, and the diagonal line is marked in red, and I used black thread on the top to show the 1/4 inch stitching on either side of the red mark. And what you're going to do next is take a ruler, cut on the diagonal line, and you're cutting this in half. So now you have your half square triangle. And what I do is I'll finger press right now, but normally I just go and press the whole thing, and I cut off one corner of nubs. Then I take my ruler, and I take the part of the ruler where the ones are in the corner, and then it has a 45-degree angle here. So I'm going to put the corner, use this corner here where I cut the nubs off, and line up the 45-degree angle, and then find 2.5 inches, because I cut it 3 inches. I want a 2-inch finished triangle, half square triangle, so my cut size is going to be 2.5 inches. So lay down the 45-degree angle and look for the 2.5 inches on both sides, and you might have to slide it up a little bit. So just make sure everything is lined up, 2.5, 2.5, and the angle is lined up. Then you have a little bit you're going to trim off. And so then if you measure this, it's 2.5 inches exactly. So the little cutoff It's better to do it now than to cut it wrong in the first place. That's what I think. There is a link in the description of the video where you can download a chart that tells you how big to cut these squares for whatever size you need. So to take 2 squares, cut to the same size, starch the fabric. Now put them right sides together. On the right light colored fabric, you're going to flip it over and you're going to draw 2 diagonal lines, the same way we did with the half square triangles, 2 at a time, only we're going to do diagonals in both directions. So again, lay your points of your corners right on the 45-degree line of the mat. Take your ruler and go just to the left-hand side so the points are exposed so you can mark from point to point. And this is a friction pin. So I'm going to mark here and all the way down. So there's one diagonal. Flip it around, line up for the next one, and make sure your fabric is even. Then mark the second diagonal, same way. And you'll stitch the same way on these. You'll stitch on either side of both diagonal lines, so you'll have 4 rows of stitching. All right, I did that whole segment of stitching and cutting without the record button turned on, so I'm going to start over again. So here I have marked my diagonal lines and I've stitched on either side of the diagonal lines here in black. Now what you're going to do is first cut the square in half both ways. And this square was cut 5 3/4. So I'm going to cut it in half at 2 7/8. It should be right along the lines here, the intersecting lines. So it is. And then cut it in half on this direction, 2 7/8. I had to use my calculator to figure this out. And then once you cut both of them in half, cut along this diagonal line. So there's 2, there's 4. Cut this in half, 2 7/8 on this one. And on the diagonal line. Now, if you open it up and you press either to the one side or press your seams open, and you should have a perfect 2.5, in this case 2.5 inch cut half square triangle. So I would go through and then cut off these nubs. And do the same with all of these. Now for the flying geese 4 at a time, you're going to cut 1 large square, and this will be the geese. That's the triangle in the center. And you'll cut 4 small squares, and this is the sky. It's the 2 triangles on the outside of the flying geese unit. And again, a chart for the sizes to cut these is in the description after the video. You'll take the small squares, the sky, and mark 1 diagonal line on each one. Then you're going to take 2 squares and line up the corner of the large square, and then the opposite corner of the large square. So you make sure that the edges are even, and this diagonal line lines up. and you're going to stitch 1/4 of an inch on either side of the diagonal line. Now you're going to cut on the diagonal line that you drew. And you're going to press these toward the dark side, the darker fabric, which in this case is this direction, and then cut off the nubs. Now here we have the 2 pieces. They're pressed to the dark side and the nubs have been taken off. Now you're going to take your remaining triangles, line up this edge like this, and line up the same thing over here. And you're going to stitch, you know the drill, 1/4 inch on each side of the diagonal line on each one. Now once you've stitched, you're going to cut it in half on the diagonal line that you drew. And I wanted to show you this closer. If you can see where this line of stitching meets the edge, this little intersection here of the top fabric and the bottom fabric, your stitching should be right at that point on both sides.